Andrew McCabe back in the news, to Donald Trump's chagrin perhaps, revealing some of what was going on behind the scenes in the Department of Justice with concerns about Donald Trump in the immediate aftermath of his firing of James Comey. So we're gonna get more details on this on Sunday. This is sort of a preview for the 60 Minutes interview that's gonna happen, but Andrew McCabe, former deputy FBI director, was fired last March, told 60 Minutes in an interview on Thursday that this portion of it, that Justice Department officials talked about invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Donald Trump. Those deliberations came in the days following Trump's sudden firing of James Comey in May of 2017. If you are not following the Constitution as closely as Andrew McCabe perhaps, Section 4 of the 25th Amendment of the Constitution states that if the Vice President and a majority of cabinet secretaries decide the president is, quote, unable to discharge the powers and duties of the presidency, they can start a process that could remove him from office. It has never been invoked. And I mean, they were talking about it. It seems inconceivable that Mike Pence and a majority of the people that Donald Trump had picked for the cabinet would do this. It is hypothetically a thing that could happen. It is being treated by Donald Trump and his supporters in the media right now like they were on the verge of a coup. But were they really? I think this is marginally more like a coup than my tweet asking him to resign earlier this week. I think they're on roughly the same playing field in terms of how likely they were to cause him to vacate the office.
It doesn't make sense. Unless there was an enormous public outcry among the base, there's no reason that Mike Pence would ever support anything like this, because
yes, conceivably he might become president in the wake of that. That would be one advantage.
You'd be president of the ashes.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, people always miss something they talk about. Well, if you get rid of Trump, you get Pence. Yeah, but not like in the best of times. He'll be succeeding a president who was pulled out of office. That is not a position that you govern with from a great deal of authority and power.
Right.
But anyway, that's a side note.
Yeah.
So Andrew McCabe.
Go for it.
No, I mean,
Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe. I like reading it. I like reading all this stuff. This is like the fantasy, this is fantasy news. I love the idea of this. For me, I like to reside in this part of my mind where I believe that it is constant chaos in the White House. I don't know how knowing it's constant chaos in the White House, and even if it's borne out that everything Andrew McCabe is saying is absolutely true, like how it materially affects the experience of being an American, and how there will be a different policy arc if everyone's like, you know what, he's right. I think that the denials will continue. I just don't think that, I mean, obviously he wasn't able to be successful in whatever attempt there may have been to oust the president from the White House.
Which I think even referring to it as an attempt is going very far. So there was a talk. What does that, I mean, was that talks or was that literally Andrew McCabe and 1 to 3 other people in a room who once discussed it? And then probably into that conversation with, that would never work.
Right, and that's the thing, is like they talk about, like, before you get on a flight, they're checking to see if the flight will crash. So technically there are thoughts about the plane crashing before every single flight. Does that mean that they were trying to crash the plane? And one thing that is shocking about this is like, those are the kinds of things you want people who know about the law, procedure, and history to be familiar with, and to continue to check in on. That in a previous time would be called due diligence, and now it is it's like Pulp Fiction.
It's a coup,
Yeah, it's a coup. It's this crazy Banana Republic stuff, but it should remind, like, that probably doesn't happen a lot of the time. Now it's just part of the constant chaos, but at the time it was shocking, and that reaction that they had to those circumstances does reflect the chaos I felt about America in those moments.
Yeah, so apparently they were similar to other Americans in that respect.
Yeah.
A few more details. McCabe also admitted he opened an obstruction of justice probe into Trump after Comey's firings and took steps to ensure it would survive him should he be fired from the FBI. I know there are gonna be some people who are going to go to their grave thinking obstruction of justice from Trump, how could you say that? I mean, check his Twitter feed. Like, if you know what obstruction of justice is, if you know how a president can exert influence over investigations, like there's tons of stuff that hypothetically could be found to have happened in the shadows, but we know what happened in the spotlight. And in the spotlight was witness tampering multiple times and other forms of obstruction of justice. I'm done having that conversation about whether it happened.
Right, and what you're saying is absolutely right. It is just the brashness that somehow masks it. The brashness, the ability to stand, like do that in such a public arena. You would assume that things like witness tampering, things like intimidation, things like obstruction of justice would be like, let's look back into the history of America and find out the last time that happened. There were like tapes of made by recording devices embedded in the walls of the White House. And there were flashlights at night of people sneaking into the Watergate Hotel. Like, that's obstruction of justice. It's not like, hey, Michael Cohen, you want to testify? Well, your father-in-law better watch the hell out. That is.
Or, hey, you people who are cooperating with the Department of Justice, if you don't, you might get a pardon.
Right, like those things are very public obstructions of justice. And it's just so weird, and that's the crazy pills I feel like I'm taking, and that must be the crazy pills that it felt like Andrew McCabe at the time must have felt like he was taking. Just being like, this is happening. I guess we should have a meeting. Like we wouldn't expect this to happen, but I guess that's the next step. We should look at the law.
And Trump's attacking him, but Trump is asserting that he said things that he didn't. Right-wing media they could argue with what Andrew McCabe is saying happened, but they're not. They're arguing with all sorts of things that he isn't saying happened. In any event, The Atlantic has a full write-up from Andrew McCabe. You can read that. Understand they include details. All of this reporting does. People will pretend that it doesn't, but it does, as to why Andrew McCabe might in some ways be biased against Donald Trump. If you think that that's a significant factor, that is something that you can look into, obviously. But the idea that they were thinking about these things, to me, does not seem that bizarre and certainly does not rise to the level of a coup. Thank you very much for watching this clip from The Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.